Okay, so you've probably heard of SAP. Thousands of the world's biggest companies, I'm talking household names, they all run on it. And for decades, they've poured billions into a product called ECC. But now, well, they're in the middle of this massive, frankly trillion-dollar migration to a brand new system, S/4HANA. So in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what that means and why this colossal shift is happening right now. Let's get into it.
Right off the bat, you have to ask the big question, why? I mean, ECC was working, right? It was the backbone of global business. It was reliable. So why on earth would all these companies take on such a huge, expensive project to replace something so fundamental to how they operate?
Well, when you boil it all down, the answer is actually incredibly simple. It all comes down to one thing: speed. And I'm not just talking about making things a little bit faster. This is about a fundamental, game-changing shift in how quickly a business can see what's happening, understand it, and then act on it.
Now, to really get why this is such a revolution, we have to go back and look at the old world. You see, SAP ECC was an absolute powerhouse in its day, but it was built for a business era that moved at a totally different pace.
Here's a good way to think about it. In the old ECC system, your day-to-day business, making sales, buying supplies, all those transactions, that all lived in one system. We'll call it the OLTP system. But your analysis, your big picture reporting, that lived in a completely separate system, like a data warehouse. They were literally in two different houses.
And this process right here shows you the core problem. So first, all day long, you're recording all your sales, all your purchases, all your financial entries. Then at night, someone would run these huge batch jobs to copy all of that data from the transaction house over to the reporting house. So what's the result? When a manager comes in the next morning, they are always making decisions based on yesterday's data. There was a time lag literally built into the architecture.
So this delay, this fundamental lag, that was the problem SAP decided it had to solve. And their solution? It was a complete game changer, a totally new kind of database called HANA.
So what in the world is an in-memory database? Well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. Instead of storing all your company's data on a relatively slow, spinning hard disk, it keeps everything in the computer's lightning-fast main memory, the RAM. The difference in speed is like having a file sitting open right on your desk versus having to walk down to a massive warehouse to go find it in some dusty filing cabinet. It's that dramatic.
And this really shows the two big ideas that make HANA so incredibly fast. First, like we said, the data lives in RAM, not on disk. But second, and this is just as important, it changes how the data is organized. See, traditional databases store data in rows. Think of a spreadsheet. If you just want to get a list of customer names, the old system has to read the entire row for each customer, name, address, phone number, everything. It's really inefficient. HANA, on the other hand, uses a columnar store. When you ask for names, it reads only the name column, completely ignoring everything else. You combine that efficiency with the raw speed of RAM, and boom, you get this massive leap in performance.
But here's the thing. This new database wasn't just a simple speed boost. No way. It actually allowed SAP to completely reimagine how an enterprise system should work from the ground up. So let's walk through the 5 foundational shifts that S/4HANA brought to the table.
The very first thing SAP did was a massive cleanup project. The old ECC system was kind of like an ancient house where, over decades, people just kept adding messy wiring and chaotic plumbing. Its data model was a tangled web of redundant, overlapping tables. It was just a huge mess.
And this slide is the perfect example. Look at this. In ECC, a single financial transaction could spray data across dozens of different tables. Tables for finance, tables for controlling, tables for indexes. It was nuts. And it meant companies spent countless hours just trying to reconcile everything to make sure the numbers actually matched up. But in S/4HANA, all of that gets replaced by one beautiful, simple table, ACDOK, the Universal Journal. It is the single source of truth for all financial data, which means that reconciliation, it's just not a thing anymore. It's built in.
Okay, so the next big change was all about the people who actually have to use the system every single day. SAP knew that a next-generation system had to have a next-generation interface.
On the left, you've got the classic SAP GUI. And look, it was powerful, but it was all about memorizing these weird transaction codes, and it was built for a desktop computer. On the right, that's S/4HANA's Fiori. It's clean, it's modern. It's basically a dashboard of simple apps, kind of like your smartphone. It's also role-based, so you only see the apps that matter for your job. And maybe best of all, it works on any device. Your phone, your tablet, your laptop, it's a whole new world.
So now that you have a much simpler data model and a ridiculously fast database, what can you do? Well, SAP could finally go back and start simplifying the actual business processes that run on top of everything.
Let's look at a few quick examples. In the old world, if a company was both your customer and your supplier, you had to create two totally separate records for them. It was messy. In S/4HANA, they're just one business partner. It seems small, but it removes so much complexity. And it's not just that. Entire processes like how you manage credit or track your assets were completely rebuilt to be simpler, smarter, and way more integrated. This wasn't just a tech upgrade. It was a chance to fix decades-old business logic.
All right, all of this is building to what is maybe the biggest payoff for any business leader. Remember those overnight batch jobs we talked about? The ones that moved the data from one house to the other? Well, with S/4HANA, they're gone.
Because the HANA database is so unbelievably fast, you just don't need a separate reporting system anymore. You can run your most complicated number-crunching analytics directly on the live transactional system. This is it. This is the end of making decisions based on what happened yesterday.
I mean, just look at this chart. The difference is startling. A complex report that might have taken 4 hours to run in the old system, something you'd literally have to schedule to run in the middle of the night, can now be generated in just a few seconds, on demand, anytime you want. That is the power of real time.
And that brings us to our final shift. Analytics is no longer this separate thing you do after the work is done. It's now embedded directly into your daily work. A CFO can just open her Fiori dashboard and see live revenue, live profitability, live cash flow, all updated to the second without ever having to ask someone to go run a report. The answers are just there. So when you put all 5 of these shifts together, you start to see the bigger picture. What we're really looking at here is a completely new blueprint for how a large, global business can operate.
And this is so important to understand. Moving to S/4HANA is not just an IT project. It's not just swapping out one piece of technology for another. It's a true business transformation that forces a company to rethink everything: its data, its processes, and its entire culture of decision-making.
So, if you're a business leader, what's the big takeaway? Well, it's really 3 things. First, you get real-time insight, which leads to better, faster decisions. Second, you get to simplify your operations by killing off all that redundant data and clunky old processes. And third, you empower your entire workforce with modern, easy-to-use tools that they can use anywhere.
You know, this whole story is just a powerful reminder that the technology of yesterday was built to solve yesterday's problems. And that really leaves us with a final question to think about. As the world just keeps getting faster and faster, what are the legacy systems or the legacy processes or maybe even the legacy mindsets that might be holding us back today?